Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hiya! You know, I'm not just someone who chats about embroidery and textile art. With my tech training superpowers, I make it faster and easier for creative people to create and sell online courses and digital products. Do you run in-person classes and workshops, and you want to boost your profits from your in-person classes? Well, I have a free gift for you. Grab your free 7-step guide and unlock your profits. Turn your in-person classes into online money makers. Learn how to get started and stop worrying about the tech. Grab this free time-saving video training course. Each step takes you closer to easier profits popping into your bank account. Your in-person classes are proven money makers, but costs are rising and they are a lot of time-sucking hassle. You want to reach more students, yet travel less. You want to release your valuable time. You want sensible, practical tech solutions, and you think that on-demand online courses could be the answer, and you want some proper training and support to do it. This 7-step video training course has been designed especially for you. Creating profitable, on-demand online versions of your popular in-person classes can be much faster and easier than you think it can. Grab this guide and you can do this. Head over to stitcherystories.com and hit the big orange button on the homepage. Simply add your name and email address for instant access to the course, and you can get started today. And now here is this week's fabulous guest. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Holly Jackson. Hi, Holly.
Hi, Sue.
It's brilliant to speak to Holly, and do you know what? I just about forgot to press record again, so thankfully we've caught this. I was only a minute in. Oh, dearie me. Right, anyway, it's been brilliant to connect with Holly, and Holly's another person who we've been connected on Instagram for a long time, and she's very kindly volunteered to come and chat with me about her story. And do you know what? There's all sorts of interesting things lurking about in Holly's story. So, I'm looking forward to having a chat with Holly. I've got a quick bio here for Holly. So, Holly is a mixed media textile artist and teacher who combines antique hand stitching techniques with modern semi-industrial materials, reclaimed fabrics, and found objects. She loves working in relief and incorporating sculptural elements into her work. Each piece of her artwork is made entirely with hand sewing, and her work has been featured in exhibitions, podcasts, and the All Stitched Up newsletter by Inspirations magazine, which I'm sure quite a lot of you subscribe to. It's like really, really great. There's all sorts of things in there. And Holly, you are, whereabouts are you based?
I live in the Chesapeake Bay region of Maryland.
Maryland. So if you know where New York is on the eastern coast of North America, then go down south a bit, down the coast, and you'll find Maryland and Chesapeake Bay. So that features in some of your work. And then previous to that, you were based in New Orleans, weren't you? So you've got some inspirations coming from New Orleans that we'll be talking to you about as well. So, woohoo. Right then, Holly's links are on her episode of stitcherystories.com. She's got a website, and Instagram is the place where I've been speaking with Holly. So is that the main place, Holly, for you, Instagram?
Yeah, that's my main social media.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, she's flossing in the moonlight. So I could tell she was an American before I even knew. Right then. So without further ado, Holly, before we dive into some really interesting bits and pieces of your story, would you like to share with us what you're working on and what's got you excited, Holly?
Actually, right now I'm working on a handmade sign for my show booth because I realized that was the part I forgot to do after I made all this art.
Oh,
you think you're done, but you never are. There's always one more thing.
Oh, there is always one more thing, isn't it? So, so which show is this, Holly? Is this fairly soon since you're now doing your sign?
Yeah, well, that's why I need to do the sign. So it starts May 19th, and I thought
Oh,
I was done. I had all my cards and postcards ordered, and then I thought I have no sign. No one will know who I am. This is a problem. So, being me and not being able to take the easy way out, I am making one for my booth.
right. You're not stitching it, are you?
No, I am hand stitching.
You're hand
There's
stitching
something wrong with me.
you're hand stitching the sign for your booth. How big is it?
18 inches by 18 inches.
Not
It's
that
not
bad,
so
but yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah. I was thinking, God, is it like, meters long kind of thing? It'll
Oh
take
no,
you
I thought
forever.
about that, and then I thought that even I'm not that crazy.
Epic. Right. Okay. So you've got a few days to be able to get on with that. So fingers crossed, Holly gets her booth sign finished off. Well done. Apart from that, I guess you're excited about your show then.
Yeah, I am. I've never done a big booth show, a juried show like this before. I've only done group juried shows, and
Right.
I've never done something where you have to kind of sit somewhere and talk about your art for 3 days. So that will be a very new experience for good or for bad.
So what kind of event is it, Holly?
So this is the town I live in, is on the plein air painting circuit, which means there's a big museum here. There's a ton of art. And the first event of plein air season is this juried show in this waterfront town. They've been doing it for 40 something years.
Right, right.
And it's 36 artists or so, and everybody gets a big booth. And as usual, I sort of applied on a whim and then got in and then had to figure out how to do it once I got in.
So given that it's plein air art, how does your embroidery and textile art fit in with the? Is everybody else, paint and paper doing their outdoor art?
Right. So basically, everyone else is either a painter or a photographer. There is one other textile artist who does textile collage. But I think other than us, it's going to be pretty much landscapes of boats that are painted or photographed. So it should be interesting to see
Yeah.
how that blends in, because her work is unusual, my work is unusual, and they're both very different from each other. But we're definitely going to be the odd ones out.
Well, or the unique ones that actually attract attention and are different in amongst a sea. Forgive the pun. A sea of similar works since you're all at the coast, possibly featuring the sea. So. Yeah, let's big cheer for Holly giving it in for textile art. Yay.
It's funny. I do think it's important, though. I think it was the embroidery podcast had an episode last year on how do you make is embroidery art. And one of the things they said is if you want it to be fine art, you have to apply to fine art places.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really essential. And that if all of these textile people start applying to painting shows, we would be able to call it fine art a lot more. And I have found that's true. I have better luck at fine art shows than I do at technical textile shows as an entry.
Now that's an interesting point, because I know over here, lots of people share their frustration at applying for, in effect, fine art, painting kind of exhibitions. And then it's just like, nope, nope, no, 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 no. Oh, it's okay, because if you can kind of sneak some paint in and pretend it's mixed media. So people get quite frustrated about that. But I think it's like anything else, really, just keep trying and keep having a go. And hopefully the tide may turn a bit. So good on you for doing that. And yeah, that's interesting that you found more success at the fine art shows than the kind of pure textile ones. That's an interesting thing. Why do you think that is?
I think it helps my pieces. They use simple stitching. They are textiles, but they're sort of funky, and they use found objects, and they're not traditional stitching.
Right.
And they don't look like traditional stitching. So I think technical textile shows don't know how to grade them according to the judging rubric. I think it just confuses the judges, which I understand. Whereas fine art, in some ways, no one really knows what a textile should be.
Right.
And
yes.
therefore, they aren't able to categorize me as, yes, you're a textile, or no, you're not a textile, because they're all painters, so they don't really know what's a textile, what's not a textile.
Yeah,
They just say, well, it's a framed piece of art and it goes on the wall, so this is fine art, right? Okay.
Yes. Oh, that's a really, I think probably quite refreshing attitude. So yeah, good on you. So that's going to be interesting then at this fair, isn't it? So you've got 3 days and you've got your booth. What are you hoping from it?
Well, my boss at the museum would tell me that I should say I'm hoping for sales because he tells me I should be hoping for sales. Um, Honestly, it would just be nice to get people's feedback when you're a full-time artist. You spend a lot of time in your studio by yourself or with your pets, and you don't get a lot of public feedback except from your friends and your family who are obviously incentivized to be nice about the things you make.
That really, let's say, that doesn't count, does it? I mean, it's nice, but in terms of helping you develop your art, it possibly doesn't help, really, does it? But yes, that's a good point. A different audience, different opinions, and different point of views. So that can be exciting as well, can't it?
Yeah, it should be really interesting. I've never done it before, and it's an experiment to see if I ever want to do it again. So we'll see how I feel about it afterwards. But it did give me a great excuse to make a lot of really interesting art over the past 6 months, which was great because I probably wouldn't have pushed so hard if I hadn't thought, oh my gosh, I need to fill this huge booth. I have to fill this huge booth. And I made some much bigger pieces than I would have made. I really tried to scale up my work because I thought I have to fill this space. I have to figure this out. Everyone else will have 1 or 2 large pieces. I need to figure out how to fit into that format. Yeah. And that alone was a worthwhile experiment for me.
Yeah, because again, quite often, especially with hand embroidery, it is in most cases time consuming, and very often the scale at which we're all working is quite small. And that again could be part of this issue about when you go to paintings, fine art kind of thing, everything's bigger, isn't it? You don't have this myriad of small pieces mostly. So yeah, that's interesting that again we've got the magic of a deadline, and you've had a specific event and a specific objective to aim for that's helped you respond and be motivated and get some stuff done. So again, you're right, we can sit on our own. I mean, obviously I'm not a commercial artist. In fact, I barely put a stitch in these days, but I'm the same with my work. You can sit here and create things till you're blue in the face, but you need to get out and talk to people and build that audience. So there's a lot of parallels anyway in between those things. So that's gonna be really interesting, isn't it? Are you excited? Yeah,
I'm nervous. I'm excited, but I'm also nervous. And I was very nervous for a long time that I wouldn't get it done. I was having nightmares about having to sew myself out of glass aquariums at night for a while. If I just sewed fast enough, I could sew myself out of the glass aquarium. But now that it's done, I am at the point where I'm excited. Everything's done, everything's framed. I am starting to get to the point where I've had a little bit of time to breathe and sort of think about what I want to say and be able to enjoy it. And my parents are coming. They've never come to a show that I've been in. So it's really nice in that sense.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. So have you got lots of friends coming along as well? Give you a cheer?
Yes. Yeah. I have tons of friends, probably more friends than I expect. I think everyone I know is going to show up. But what's funny is when you do a big show, so there are posters all over town and all over our area for it. And I ran into my neighbor the other day and she says, oh, you have a new job. I saw you on the poster. I said, it's not new. I've had this job for years. She said, well, you're on the poster, so it's real now, right?
Oh, how wonderful. So you're the poster child for the event, are you?
Well, we're all in the poster, but now all my neighbors no longer think I'm unemployed because I'm on an art poster. So I didn't know whether to find that reassuring or not. But.
Oh, no, I love that. Oh, that's really great. Yeah, so all these people around about have been thinking, what the hell does she do all day long? We don't see her very often. She doesn't leave the house. What the hell is she doing?
My husband would walk the dog. People would say, we never see her. Is she okay? Where is she?
Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, I'm so pleased because, so hopefully, have you taken some pictures of the poster?
Yes, I do have, and I keep meaning to share it on Instagram. I did at the
Yeah, do
beginning when
it.
I got in.
Do it, do it. Yeah, that'd be really brilliant. Because, yes, she's actually quite right because it's real, isn't it? You are there. All these people who think, oh, I can't call myself an artist. Well, somebody is now because you're on a poster for an art exhibition and there you are. So, oh, I think that's brilliant. Excellent. Right, which then kind of leads into, so now you're saying, you've said that, yeah, I'm an artist. I'm on the poster. Your neighbour doesn't think you're unemployed anymore. So we've got a story there. But do you want to just kind of take a little step back, Holly, and give us a quick glimpse into how you got into textile art and embroidery, how you have, developed your techniques and so on. And then I think we'll have a little wander into how Holly, the artist, full-time artist, came to being as well, because we've got a story lurking about in there as well. So does that sound like a good plan?
That sounds great.
Excellent. So there we are. So how did you get into embroidery in the first place, Holly? That'd be really great for you to share with us.
So I'm not one of those people who grew up doing it. I grew up in a household where no one really did anything creative. My grandparents didn't do anything creative.
Right.
I never had that. I read a lot of books, but there wasn't any of that. I didn't enjoy art class even. I didn't like drawing. I wasn't good at it. But so I'm 37 now. So when I was in my early 30s, I had terrible insomnia and I went to the doctor and he said, well, I recommend you try embroidery or coloring books. Those two tend to work to put people to sleep. And I tried coloring books and I hated them. And so I picked up this little basic circular embroidery sampler and it didn't help me sleep, but I loved it. Oh, there was just something so interesting to my brain about hand sewing. And then fairly soon after, I had seen a picture of a Jenny Aiden Christie, one of her beginner stumpwork kits. And I thought, well, that looks scary, but I can work on it slowly and try it. And that was when I discovered kind of relief stumpwork techniques. And I just got hooked. Oh. And I just started taking classes and reading books and teaching myself. And it was made in my second or third project I ever did.
Wow. That's really interesting because most people would do more surface embroidery and stuff before. And certainly, Jenny's sculptural pieces are absolutely astounding.
Yeah, but you only know that if someone's told you that.
That's very true. That's very true.
I was just making stuff I wanted to hang up in my apartment. I wasn't thinking about how do I learn and progress? I just say, okay, well, I want that on my wall, so I'm going to figure out how to make that thing. Yes.
And that was when I was speaking with Lottie, she said the same thing. She doesn't really like to say, or doesn't say, oh, it's this for beginners, this is advanced, because it kind of puts people off. And it's like, if somebody wants to have a try, then have a try. So, so you're another one like that, that's inspired by something and just decided you're going to try and see how you get along. Yeah, so you cut a big learning curve out there then, Holly.
Yeah, and I just started teaching myself. I read a lot of books. I would do projects from stumpwork book. I didn't take any classes. I just, in my free time, I was kind of getting obsessed with this and doing this all the time. And all my friends were making fun of me. And I was spending all my time sewing.
I was going to say, I've never heard of anybody saying, oh, well, if you want to put yourself to sleep, do embroidery. Crikey, I'm sure all the listeners are sat there going, what?
It doesn't work. I still have insomnia, but I have a really great job, so I feel like I still won.
Well, yeah. So that's the first time I think anybody has got into embroidery because they went to their doctor because they couldn't sleep. I suppose there possibly is a bit of piece in there of it stills your mind and, it's relaxing. And quite often, if you have got insomnia, anything like that can help, can't it? But
right.
You're the first.
It doesn't work for me. It makes me think more because then I have ideas that I want to make.
That's what I was thinking. If anything like that for me, just like sets your brain off again. It's like, oh, stop it, brain. Really shut up. Go to sleep.
No. Yeah, it doesn't work for me, but maybe it works for some people.
Possibly. Yeah. Oh, well, that's a first as well. Being prescribed embroidery to put you to sleep. Yes. So you've drifted into it in your 30s because you couldn't go to sleep. And and you've been pretty much self-taught. You've just gone and found something that you thought was visually appealing and interesting, and off you went. So given that, what did you say? You are 38 or something along those lines, 37. So in a relatively short period of time, you've gone from somebody who told themselves that they couldn't draw, they couldn't do this, you hated colouring, blah, blah. So here you are now, you're a full-time artist. So how has that evolved, Holly? Because I'm sure there's a few stories lying around in there as well, because that's quite an interesting and again, quite a unique progression.
Yeah, I'm one of those people, I was really serious about it as a hobby. And I would always tell people that I really felt like I could do this, but I didn't have enough time to make enough work and design enough pieces, because when you work full time, you don't have that kind of time. But then when the pandemic happened, I was working a job where I was essentially furloughed. And they said, who knows, 6 months, 8 months, we don't know. Right. We'll get back to you.
Yeah.
I had savings, so that wasn't a problem. So I didn't have to worry about could I eat. But then I thought, I can't just sit around for 6 or 8 months.
No.
I have to do something with my life. But Cities and Guilds was still running the online level 2 stumpwork program.
Right.
And I thought, well, if I do want to get a job, having some kind of certificate in this would probably be positive. And I had, at that point, not done a ton of designing of my own pieces. Right. And I wanted to learn the process for that, because I knew that's what I would need to build up a portfolio.
Yeah, yeah.
But also that program is designed to help you build up a portfolio by the end of it.
Right, yeah.
So I thought, well, I have time. I can do this. And before I was even done and got my certificate, I had 2 teaching offers. So I never had to go back to my old job.
Oh, how wonderful. So again, a bit like when I was chatting, was it Lottie? Or I don't know. There's a few people have basically had a story whereby, yes, the pandemic was grim for many, many people. However, for others, there was an opportunity that just suddenly appeared. So for you, you had that opportunity, as you say. Now you had some time and you took it and carried on. So is that teaching locally, Holly?
So I teach locally. There's a really great regional museum here. I'm an artist faculty member for them, and I teach for a place called Winslow Fine Arts in Seattle, and they do online classes. So I teach sort of big process classes for them, and then I teach smaller, more bite-sized things in person here.
Wow. That's just amazing that you'd gone from being an enthusiastic hobbyist, started, worked through, thought, right, I'll do a certification. And then there you are now. You've got 2 interesting sounding jobs as well. Quite different, quite a contrast, I would say, between those jobs.
Yeah, they are fun and they are interesting. And again, that really helped convince people that I was employed when I got those, because when you switch jobs like that, everyone in your life gets very worried about you all of a sudden. So they were important, not just because, I got to teach, but also because I think they showed, my parents and the people around me that I was employable, but I hadn't just jumped off the deep end and, lost it. It's valuable in multiple ways.
Yeah, I can really equate to that. I had quite a life-changing upheavals 20-odd years ago, and I'm sure my family and friends and my family were just thinking, where the hell's this sensible, our sensible, hard-working career girl gone? Where's she gone? This other person's now... I did wonder to myself at some point, at what point has my life turned into a soap opera character? Seriously. But so I can totally understand that. I kind of went the opposite way and haven't gone back into corporate life since. But yeah, so really you're building up, I guess, what we would call these days a portfolio career. You've got some jobs, and then where does your own art come into all of this, Holly? As you say, you were looking for some sales from your exhibition. How does all that work out? Is that the third element of your career at the moment?
I love making art, but I also love teaching, in part because it gets me out of my studio, and
yes.
Spending 7 hours a day or something in my windowless studio is not necessarily great for me all the time.
No, you'll turn into a mushroom.
I know. But I also, I frequently get ideas from my students. Well, they say, well, what if I tried this? And I thought,
Yes.
yeah, what if I did try that?
Yes.
Go
Yes,
home and try it.
exactly. Yeah.
So I like teaching, but I also find it valuable in that I can sort of filter the things that come up in class back through into my own pieces, which
Yes.
often
Yes.
makes my own pieces better. So I feel like no matter what happens, even if I was selling a ton of art each year, I would keep teaching just for sort of the inspiration
Yeah.
and that feedback loop. I think
Yeah.
is
Brilliant.
important for me and for my process.
Yeah. And again, that applies to lots of things that we do, isn't it? Because quite often when we're talking with somebody or or they're stuck or they've done something, and then again, because people don't know what they're supposed to be doing quite often, you can look and think, oh, I wouldn't have thought of doing it like that. Or, somebody will throw away a comment and it's like, yes. And your light bulb goes off on top of your head, doesn't it? And you think, yes, that's it. Oh, yes, I know what to do. And off you can't wait to get home then to give it a try, can you? And come up with the new ideas.
Yeah. And a lot of, sort of the ways my pieces have changed have, I think, been influenced by students, or sometimes I'll bring in something in progress to show off a technique, and then someone will say, hey, why don't you do this with that section there? That would look great. And I would think, oh, yeah, that would look really good. I'll go home and play with that. So
Oh,
it's all been
wonderful.
really helpful. But I do
Yeah.
love making pieces. I've been making bigger pieces in the past 6 months. Now that I know I have the ability to do that,
Yeah.
I will probably continue to do some of that. But I also like making, some stump work techniques don't scale up beyond about 8 by 10. To
Right.
me, at
Right.
least easily. When you frame, there can be issues.
Yes, that's right. Because the whole beauty of it is the dimensional aspect to it as well, of course. Right. And
Right.
in terms of stump work, do you stick with the traditional, I mean, some of those techniques to me just look like, oh my God, so fiddly. Have you managed to put like a modern twist? Is probably the wrong word, but some kind of modern twist to the stump work since you've been almost teaching yourself?
Well, that's sort of how I got into the mixed media thing, because I knew I
Right.
needed to make a body of work. I needed to do it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And stump work is not quick. I love it, but it
No,
is
that's what I was
so slow.
wondering. Yes.
So the first Mardi Gras float I made was for Cities and Guilds. It was all classic stump work. It took 140 hours. And
Oh,
I thought, I want to
wow.
make more of these. I can't do that. I can't take 140 hours. That's nuts. I'll never get anything done. I need to
Right.
get a bunch of these done. So now what I do is I use the classic fiddly techniques for maybe one section that really has impact. And then I will mix in mixed media techniques like painting and heating Tyvek, or using art
Ah,
yarns to make dimensional
sneaky.
trees. Right. So now I kind of mix it in with these industrial modern things. So you have these sections of stump work, but obviously if you just have to make one section, it's still time consuming, but it's a
Mhm.
lot less time consuming than making a whole piece that way. And actually often I like the effect more than if I had done it the classic way
Yeah.
the whole way through. I feel like it's a better piece in the end. But most of it came about through having to find this new, faster working method while still wanting to retain my sort of stump work roots.
Yeah. Oh, that is sneaky. Actually, I really like that idea as well. So, you see, the things that you think about when you're challenged to have a deadline, like you're saying, you've got this big booth and you've got to fill it. You can't do it with stumpy, traditional small little fiddly stump work. So I love that how you've managed to scale up what you love into something bigger. Now, I think what we need to do at this point is you mentioned your Mardi Gras float. So let's take a step back and can you tell us where Mardi Gras floats have come into your textile art, Holly? Because I think that's an interesting story. There's various things lurking around in there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, so the first one I ever made was I was reading a book from the 1940s on the history of Mardi Gras, and it talked about women who were anonymous designers who had designed the way Mardi Gras design used to work, and I think to some extent still does, is one artist would make watercolor sketches of everything, the floats, the jewelry, the costumes, the invitations, and then those would be sent off to various specialists. So to costume people in Paris, to float
Oh.
makers. And then those people would then interpret those watercolor designs in their own specialty, but it would all look right because it had been generated by the same artist by hand.
Right. So these are all the floats and costumes that you would have for these big, massive Mardi Gras parades down in New Orleans. That's really the essence of these.
Right. So one designer controlled everything, and
Right.
these big crews were big. And so it turned out that for multiple decades, there were women who were the lead designers for the three big crews. And this was an era where women could not legally parade.
What?
Women could not legally parade.
When was this? What sort of dates?
The 1880s.
1880. Yeah. So yeah, typical. Women couldn't really do anything in them days, could they?
So right. So women couldn't parade. Women couldn't even really. They could go to balls, which were private.
Yeah.
Behind closed doors, but they couldn't sort of participate in the public life of Mardi Gras. And then these women, they found out, Tulane has done all this research and preserved this incredible archive of stuff.
And what was that? Tulane? Was that university?
If you look up Tulane University and then Carnival Collection, it is searchable by all kinds of terms. It's got thousands of documents in it. They're high res.
The links for that will be in Holly's episode.
You can lose days in those archives.
Oh, the wonderful museum and university archives are fabulous out there for that kind of thing. Right.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, you can, at least for me, I can just get lost in them. But I got interested. So now we know these women's names, but we don't necessarily know a lot else about them necessarily because they weren't seen as important, so it wasn't recorded.
Oh, so more women artists hidden in history, yeah.
Right. Or in one case, this one cracks me up because one woman had the same name as her four sisters, and they can't tell which one it was who was the designer because they all had the same name, and so did many of their cousins.
Oh, no.
So it could have been any of them.
Any of a crew of oh, good grief. If there's anything that just highlights the lack of opportunity, it's been lumbered with the same name. It's like, what? Wow.
Yeah, so I guess because of this repetition of traditional family names, it could have been about 6 women in this family who all were living in this era and who would have been associated with these various crews.
Wow, these ladies are lost. They're lost, aren't they? Wow. So your mission is to dig out these ladies and get their art shown in some way or form.
Well, and what's interesting when you look at their art is full of personality and individuality. I mean, you can tell that this person was a full-fledged individual with artistic opinions and thoughts.
Yeah.
And the subjects they took on. And that's what I think is so cool. You sort of don't need to know a lot about them. So one of them, for instance, Jenny Wild, she covered all of her watercolors in a layer of glitter at the end because she wanted to emphasize that everything should really glow.
Sparkle and glow, yeah.
So I love that. Like that was really something that she felt really passionately about. And you look at hers and everything just literally glitters, even though these documents are so old. They just sort of jump off the page and they glitter at you. And then one of the other designers was an Art Deco designer at kind of the height of the Art Deco movement. Yeah. And her stuff is fantastical. Imagine an Art Deco dragon, wow. Fantastical, amazing stuff with just such an imagination. So I started with ones that had been done by female designers. And then I branched out into, there was a parade in the 1960s. The theme was Gardens of the World. So they did everything from Colorado cliff gardens to Dutch gardens to Parisian gardens there's one I did, which is a jungle garden.
Yes. You've got shared an image of that, the holy trees in the jungle.
Right. But I like this idea of exploring what these looked like as landscapes with my sort of weird blender of techniques thrown at them. Because that's what they were really designed to be, is moving landscapes.
They're on the back of a lorry, aren't they? So you've taken a large 3D landscape, a scene, and you're now using those as an inspiration, using your sneaky stump work and your modern materials and so on to then distill the essence of those down into an image. Wow.
And if you think about it, I feel like what I'm doing was not so different from the intention, because these
Mm,
things would have been passed off to other people in their specialty. My specialty is just textiles.
that's right. It does. There's echoes of that comment we made a couple of months ago, kind of collaborating with your ghosts, and this is a really
Yeah.
good example of that. You are, as you say, it's still part of that intention that one person was like the creative director almost, and then different specialties would interpret their designs and so forth. So you're still taking part. Yeah, I love that. What a lovely story.
It's been such a fun project. I've had so
Yeah.
much fun making these little things. I have plans definitely to make more. I'm going to start up again this summer.
Yeah, yeah.
Once I'm done the show. But the hard part, honestly, everyone should go look at the Tulane archives. The hard part is choosing which ones. There's about 2,000 of them on the archives. You could spend your whole life making these things and you could never make all the ones you wanted to make.
Oh,
And they're all
brilliant.
interesting and they're all different.
Yeah, because obviously every year for a number of years, this process has carried on. So it's wow. Because one of the things that we can quite often struggle with is how are we unique? It's back to I was talking about earlier on. How are we unique? What is it about our art that's different or attractive to a different group of people or attractive to a specific group of people? What is it? And I think developing that artistic voice and kind of unique style can be a real challenge. So I think you've kind of stumbled upon, I don't know, but whatever the route was from reading those books, I think you have definitely stumbled upon here an idea that, as you say, it's limitless. Really, I haven't heard or seen anybody doing anything like this.
Yeah, when I first proposed this, my city and guilds tutor was amazing, and it was this big complicated project that was clearly really beyond the scope of a level 2. And she said, "Well, you can do this, but you don't have to do this.
Yeah.
It's up to you."
Yeah.
I said, "That's okay. I want to do this. I feel really passionately about this." She says, "That's okay. I support you, but you also don't have to. You can give up."
So remind me, which was the first piece that you did in purely, I'm sure you probably just said already, I've got a memory like a gnat when I'm talking with people like this. So this was as part of your City and Guilds was the first kind of Mardi Gras themed piece you did.
So the Lady of Shalott float was the first one. And I also did for the unit where you have to make a stumpwork person, I did a costume by another female Mardi Gras designer.
Right.
As my stumpwork person with full costume in a Art Deco butterfly costume.
Oh,
so
lovely.
Those kind of went together. But yeah, and you can tell that one is very stumpwork. There's a lot of needle lace, and it's much smaller than the others too. It's maybe 4x6. I've managed to scale up to about 8x10 now.
Right.
With the mixed media and sort of my new working method. So they've gotten bigger, but they haven't, you don't necessarily lose detail, which was important.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier on about the challenge of taking this booth, it being bigger, having to work to size. And I can't remember whether it was when we was just chatting beforehand or earlier in the conversation. So just forgive me, everybody, my brain's a bit scrambled today. It's this idea of building a body of work. So, you've stumbled upon this theme. So is this something that you're, very definitely going to carry on as a body of work? Where's that taking you, Holly?
I'm definitely going to make more floats. And in fact, I have sent off some fairly cheeky proposals to museums about doing exhibitions who have historical associations with the art colleges that train these people.
Ooh,
and things like that.
That's interesting.
Newcomb Arts College trained almost all of these women, and it's now a museum. Yeah. So in a perfect world, I would love to say do an exhibit there in the school where they studied, that kind of thing. So I would love to get them on display, somewhere that had significance.
Some significance to the story. Yeah.
I think that would be great to sort of see all this happen in the place where these people were living and working and training, especially these women from a long time ago. We'll see. I've sent out some pitches, so I have no idea if I will ever hear anything back. You know how it is. You just send your email off and you see.
You've made the start. You've been brave. You've thought, oh, do you know what? This would be really great for these reasons. And you've done something about it. You haven't just sat there and thought about it. You've actually gone ahead and done it. And so at least you made the first start, because nothing's going to happen if you don't do anything. Do you know what I mean? Nobody knows you exist otherwise. So, let's give you all a big cheer for just actually taking the initiative for that. But that is that really would be amazing, wouldn't it, to go around full circle with something like that?
Yeah, I think that would be great to be part of some kind of exhibit or display, in the place where these women had trained. I think that would be cool. But I do think it's funny when you look at the Chesapeake work I've done and the New Orleans work I've done. I do think in some ways the themes are similar because they're all about kind of parts of culture that aren't there anymore.
Right. Yes.
Right. And like the Chesapeake stuff I've done is really about climate change, but it's about areas and communities that have disappeared due to climate change. And I haven't had much time to think this whole year between teaching and trying to make it apart to keep up with everything. But when I got to the end, I thought, really, these are about sort of lost cultural touchstones in different areas, different cultures. But I think I have lived in multiple areas where water levels have affected culture and the way it disappears and the way it changes. And I do think when you look at the Chesapeake stuff I've done and then the New Orleans stuff I've done, there is that common thread.
Yes.
Cultural changes often elicited by water and water rise.
Yeah. New Orleans, there was that horrible hurricane and the flooding and all that. And it's ongoing as well, isn't it? It's a very at-risk area affected by rising water. And
I mean, they're on the front lines, basically, of climate change. But Maryland, I have to say, is not that far behind in what's happening, at least in the Chesapeake region. Areas, well, like we talked about before we started recording, erosion is coming for these islands and these places and these populations quickly.
Yeah. So, because there's one of your pieces there that you've sent to me, the sinking islands of the Chesapeake Bay, and then there's another one, the last house on one of the islands in the bay as well. So this isn't something that's happened thousands of years ago. This is a Victorian house that had a lifespan of less than 100 years before it sank.
And the Holland Island one is amazing. So the Holland Island one was one of the most populated islands of the bay in 1900.
Wow.
And that house was photographed sinking widely in 2010. Wow. And the rest, as you can see, that little spit of land, that's what's left. The rest of that huge landmass that had a post office and schools and a whole community had already disappeared at that point. And like you said, that's basically less than 100 years from full population to complete disappearance. And when I read that and researched that kind of blew my mind that those changes had happened so quickly in that area.
And do you know what I find really intriguing is the journey of you thinking, oh, this stumpwork thing's quite interesting, and then stumbling across these hidden lady artists who were working on creating Mardi Gras things down in New Orleans. But then really underneath it all, when you keep digging, what's the common thread between it all? As you say, climate change and rising water levels, wiping out cultural identity, cultural history, whatever. So that's really interesting. I mean, where I am, I'm on the East Yorkshire coast in the UK, and our coastline is one of the fastest eroding in Europe, in the world, I think. It's great chunks. And where I am, we are south of, there's a lot of chalk, very tall chalk cliffs. The chalk spine goes away and we're left with what boulder clay it's called. It's literally clay. So our little cliffs of clay, almost every time the sea comes in, twice a day, another chunk, and there's big chunks of it falling into the sea. And there's some old maps here. We had like villages, obviously, in the medieval time and Vikings, 4 and 5 miles out to sea. There was villages there, and in still a relatively short period of time, and they've gone. And here we've got villages now who are literally, the houses are falling into the sea. So it's a problem everywhere. But sometimes we think it's only happening where we are, but actually It's not, is it? It's everywhere. And I think the fact that your art underlying theme is impacted by all of those, I think is like really, really interesting as well. Have you identified the next piece that you're kind of really dying to work on when you've got rid of your exhibition, etc.? Or have you started one?
I want to make more art. I haven't quite figured out. I'm definitely going to make more floats. I haven't quite figured out what the non-float piece of it is going to be yet.
Right, yeah.
I tend to come up with things by just reading a bunch of history books, and I haven't had time to do that. So
yes.
I think I will probably make more Chesapeake pieces in that series, although I'm not sure what they will be yet. I'm hoping to someone told me there's a sinking church that the water comes in and floods, at high tide and stuff somewhere around here. So I may go take pictures of that.
Right,
and look at possibilities. I've applied for a bunch of shows. I've applied for kind of a bunch of other big opportunities. So in part, I'm waiting to hear back to see what might be suited to those opportunities before I start on anything humongous that I can't sort of get out of if I need to change track. That's the problem when it takes so long to make anything.
Yeah.
You can't sort of get halfway and decide to change your mind. You have to really commit and have the time and space to do so. So often I feel like, okay, well, I have to know what shows I'm going to be in, and I have to know what exhibitions I'm going to be in, and then I can figure out what to make.
Right.
But it's hard to do it for me the other way around because it's so easy to end up stuck in something or on a deadline that doesn't work.
Exactly.
Which sounds like a not very creative way to make art.
Well, I think it's probably the reality that lots of people are faced with. And what goes with that is sometimes, I suppose it depends on what the deadlines are as well. And when you've discovered these opportunities, because as you say, back to textile art, it can often take much longer. And there'll be criteria and a subject and all those kind of things. Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it, Holly?
Yeah, or depending on what region the show is in, or someone sent me a juried show call to entry that's in California. It's a textile show. It looks really interesting. But California art is probably different from Chesapeake art or from New Orleans art. So if I was going to do it, I might want to make a new piece for that if I got serious about submitting. And then I would have to think, okay, so what would I submit for a California show versus a local show or a New Orleans show? But it's funny. I'm one of those people. It's almost like the more restrictive the brief, the more creative I can get.
It helps you to narrow your focus, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like if someone just says, okay, you have 6 months, you can make anything. I don't know what I would do. That would be really scary. But if someone says, okay, well, you have 2 months and it's got to go for these 3 shows, but you got to make something you love, then I could make something amazing.
Yes, it's back to focus. Absolutely. It wins out every time. Focus and direction. Yeah, brilliant. So you're definitely thinking in terms of series and building up specific series as a body of works. I think quite often, that's not something that comes across strongly with a lot of people I speak to. Some are definitely working in series and would then release a body of work. So that's something. Have you been very conscious of doing that, or again, do you think it's just a lucky stumble?
I've been very conscious of doing that early on because I was getting into fine art shows, and that's how painting works. That is how painters work. And so often there should be some guide that explains all this, but it isn't. So when you apply to fine art shows, they give you 3 slots you can submit 3 pieces or 5 pieces.
Right.
And in the beginning, I would submit 3 random pieces and I wouldn't get into anything. But what essentially, from what I understand, what they're looking for when they say 3 or 5 is they're saying, show us a series, show us a related body of work. And once I figured that out, I thought, okay, well, that's great, but I don't really
have one
any of that. I've been making one-offs. And that's when I thought, okay, I'll make a couple more floats. I'll see what happens. And then, when I started doing other regional shows, I thought, okay, well, I'll make a regional series. So I'll have that for shows. But again, I think it depends on the context that you work in. If I was submitting to technical textile shows, I don't think that would necessarily matter so much.
Right.
But if you're submitting to fine art shows, you need to sort of work like the painters or the photographers work. You need to be understandable to those same jurors.
Yes, yes.
And that's the way their brain works. And so that's in some way, I think you have to work that same way to increase your odds of success because you're already so weird and unrecognizable anyway.
Yes.
You have to at least have sort of an outline and a format that people can understand.
Help them cope with the weirdness, give them a framework to understand the weirdness. And I suppose it's bringing that coherence, visual coherence to what you're doing. As I say, I think we're all, I mean, crikey, anything I do is just like a random idea, or it's like, oh, somebody wants them doing this shape or this color or these things, or again, because I just like, I rarely, I do sit down and think, oh, I'll do that. I get this random idea. But when you look at it all, it's all utterly random. And I'm sure there's lots of people holding their hand up going, yes, mine's all utterly random too. But possibly this idea of series and collections is putting that coherence to, visually making them, I suppose, more visually pleasing together.
Well, and I do think it helps you think about ideas on a deeper level when you spend multiple pieces worth of time thinking about an interconnected idea. I do think that helps you process it on a deeper level, and that maybe your pieces come out. I think certainly my Chesapeake pieces came out stronger because I did them one after another.
Yes.
Basically, I did them back to back. They were all large. They took a long period of time. But during that time, I got to kind of think about all the concepts behind it for the next one.
Right.
And they sort of got better and better as I went along. And in part because I think I had distilled all of that conceptual stuff by working through as a series. So I do think it's not all about what people want to see. I think there are advantages to it if you're thinking about bigger ideas in your art, like stuff like climate change or things like that. Just getting an excuse to sit down and think about something and read about it and research it for a long period of time can be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's been a really, really interesting point of view there, Holly, and it's not something I'd particularly really thought about either. So thank you for bringing that and talking to us about it. As we head off, otherwise, as I say, every week we can be sat here talking for hours. So you've put all these like cheeky proposals together, and kind of looking past your current exhibition. So what's next for Holly Jackson and her sneaky stumpwork then?
So it's funny. I sat down at the beginning of the year and I made a big picture, like bucket list things, and basically on it was get a piece in a museum exhibition and write a craft book. So that's the other thing. Like, I know that's ages away, but I would love to be able to write kind of a process book about my methods and a craft book. I think that would be really cool and would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. A different twist on the traditional techniques that you've expanded and scaled up a bit. So yeah, I think that'd be a brilliant book, that.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to write kind of a mixed media, contemporary stump work book. I think that would be neat, but who knows? And I have learned not to plan too much because my goal when I got my certificate done was that I could get someone to hire me to teach 2 classes by Christmas.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the year, I was so far beyond that. I sort of sat down to plan for this year and I thought, I don't even know. I think what I learned is you don't know what will happen and you just have to jump on the opportunities when they come your way, and maybe planning too much doesn't work either.
Yeah, you can be too constrained then, because then you're sucked into a path that you've, as you say, you've committed to, and then it's like, oh, but these other things have come along, and then you just get too scattered, don't you? So yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy doing all the online stuff I do, and it's not easy doing all the creative stuff that you guys do. I love it. I love the contrast and the challenges. I think that's what keeps us all engrossed, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's funny. I ran into my friend the other day and she said, "You're doing great." She said, "Just be brave and don't miss anything." She says, "That's all you have to do for the rest of the year to be successful. Just be brave, don't chicken out, and don't miss any opportunities because you thought you weren't good enough or you couldn't do them." I thought that was really good advice for artists.
Oh, that is absolutely excellent advice. And what a brilliant way, I think, to wrap up a really, truly interesting conversation, Holly. What lovely, wise advice. Is she an artist?
Yes, she's a very successful artist who's retirement age, so she knows what she's talking about.
Right. Well, there we are. So yes, well, that's definitely going to make a quote on the grid, is that, Holly? That is really, really great. Yeah. Be brave and don't miss the opportunities because you think you're not good enough. Brilliant. Right. So I've just had a really interesting conversation with Holly there, and she was wondering about what she was going to do next. And this is a first because just before I've finally produced this episode, Holly and I had a brainstorm, and so we've just added an extra bit in because Holly's got quite a few good bits of news that really follow on from that conversation. And, normally people record an episode with me and then, sometimes a couple of days, sometimes a couple of weeks, sometimes a couple of months. Poor old Holly's been waiting 6 months, so I do apologise. But the good news is we've got some extra interesting things that we both think is going to be really motivational for you all as well. After that bit of preambling waffle. So, Holly, we were just at the point of what were you going to do next, weren't we? You were thinking about, you'd been putting some like cheeky proposals and that kind of thing in. So do you want to pick up the story? You're also just running up to your exhibition as well. So I think a few things have sparked off that as well, haven't it? So do you want to go back to your exhibition and what happened and all your exciting news that you want to update us with? How about that?
That sounds great. So first of all of the emails and proposals I sent went nowhere. I was completely ignored.
Oh,
so that was fine. But I did work really hard doing my first ever sort of booth style show.
Yes.
And we had talked about it, and I had just said I was going to be brave and just put it out there. I had no idea what was going to happen. I sold one small piece all weekend, which already seems like a victory because I had never sold anything before that.
Well, yes, let's just stop. That is a victory. And one thing that you did say when I asked you, what do you want to get out of that exhibition, that booth exhibition, was you were hoping for some sales. So you got a sale. Excellent. Your first sale as well. So that's really exciting. So let's acknowledge that.
Yeah, so I would have been happy to go home and be good with that. But at literally the last 5 minutes, and I didn't leave early. Everyone else left early. This is my new advice. Do not leave the booth show an hour early, even though no one's there. In the last 5 minutes, I was about to get ready to pack up. I thought I would be good and really stay till the end time. This woman I've never met comes up to me and hands me a card and says, I run a gallery and I would like to represent you. And I said, I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong person.
Holly, honestly.
Really resonate with a lot of art gallery art, and I assumed it would never work for me. And she says, well, I represent Afro-Caribbean artists and Haitian artists and self-taught artists. Did you go to art school? And I said, no, not really. I did a Cities and Guilds for a year. And she said, yeah, you don't make art like someone who's self-taught. I really want to sign you. Look at my website. Think about it. We can talk next week about a contract. And she represents a whole bunch of artists, not who are fiber artists. I'm her only fiber artist, but who are kind of just like me in terms of style and color. And it was cool. It was kind of like I found my people and gained gallery representation all at the same time. And then through a group show there, I sold a couple more pieces and I was offered a full solo show in April, which will be in part sponsored by the venue and in part by the gallery.
Wow.
So the reward of all this is I have to make a lot more art and I'm back at the same scary deadline that I don't know whether I will make and I don't know what will happen at the end of it. And if you asked me in April what I would do next, I would have the same answer, which is I have no idea. Let's see. But there is some value in doing your best and being brave and not chickening out or diluting your art into what other people want to see and just showing up.
Yes, that is just astounding. So literally the last 5 minutes, you were literally just, because I know you go to these shows and exhibitions, and I know if people have been there for 4 days, they are absolutely sick to death of talking. They really just want to go home and have a massive glass of wine and a bath or something. And or is that just me? But it's just like, so you stuck it out. Well done. And literally at the last minute, that lady came up to you. Wow.
The hilarious part is she wasn't even there to buy art. She says she doesn't even like the show. She was only there to help another painter who was a friend of hers pack up his car. So she didn't even come to the real show. He was just talking to someone. So she thought she'd look around for 5 minutes.
And you were there. Wow.
And my booth was there. So opportunities are everywhere. Not that everything
Wow.
pans out, because
No.
clearly I did a lot of things and some of
Mm.
it was nothing. But the value in showing up and being nice to people and just doing the thing you do and assuming it will work out is immense.
Wow. Yeah. And that is an absolutely fabulous story. I'm so glad that we've hopped back in and added this kind of PS before it's finished. That is absolutely amazing, Holly. I am blown away by that. And I was only just writing, because when I'm editing the episodes, I kind of scroll a load of notes down. And the kind of, obviously, the last thing I wrote down was the thing where you were telling me your friend gave you some fantastic advice. Holly has followed that brilliant advice, and look what's happened. So, wow. That is really super brilliant, Holly. I bet you are absolutely, as we say here in Yorkshire, chuffed to bits.
I am, but I also feel like I've come full circle and then I am now have another thing that I've never, remember I said for the
Yes,
second year I
yes.
wanted to not do new things all year.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm failing because now I have another thing on a deadline that I've never done and I don't really understand. I don't know what the final will look like for a solo show, but
yeah, yeah.
so it's circular, but it's also progress, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
it's really, really fantastic. So your own show, but you are now, because we've already talked about building up that body of work. So you are now, building that body of work up, and your couple of series and that sort of thing. So I guess that makes sense. I was just going to go back to how wonderful as well for that lady to have. Yes, she definitely wanted you, and you fit right into her group of artists who she represents, and you found your community as well, which is really brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it's all hard work and coincidence.
Well, sometimes it really is, yes. And if you're not there, and if you haven't shown up, and you're not visible, and nobody knows you exist, well, nothing's ever going to happen at all, is it? It just never is. So,
and never leave early, apparently.
Never leave early, even though you're really desperate to. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. And quickly then, just while we were talking about that, so how did you actually find the experience of doing that show? Because I know you was really looking forward to it.
It was fascinating. It was good practice to learn to talk about my art. I have realized that I probably need more of that before I do a solo show and have so much attention on it. That's part of what I need to practice going into that.
Yeah.
It was also fascinating in the sense that since it was a mixed audience, so my husband worked my booth with me. And the other really interesting thing I found is men would come and they would be interested in the textiles. But even if I was available, they would ask my husband questions about the textiles. So they were interested, but they wanted to talk in general to another man about the textile art. And he would say, well, it's my wife's work and you can talk to her, but they would continue asking them questions. Whereas women would come talk to me, but it's almost like they were sort of scared of the person who did the sewing. It was almost completely exactly gender breakdown.
Wow.
Among who talked to my husband and who talked to me, even though people of all genders were interested in my art. And the best group I talked to all day was a bunch of art school students who came by. And they were the most fun, and they were trying to decide whether to be a textile minor or a paper making minor.
Oh.
And they were talking to me about textiles, and I had paper in some of my pieces, and it was the most fun I had the whole weekend. And it was a blast, and I kind of wish they could have hung around for 3 hours, and it would have been great.
Wow. Well, again, that's fascinating, isn't it, about people talking or not talking to you while you're on your booth? And is there some of that old patriarchal rubbish still in there? Do you know what I mean?
It was so
men just got to talk to men.
I guess they were much more comfortable. I guess I understand it, but it was really. But the fact that they were interested at all was interesting to me. Amazing, I thought they would just pass on by. They wanted to engage, just maybe in a way they were comfortable with. The whole thing was really interesting. It was uncomfortable, but worth doing.
Yeah.
I'm not actually a huge extrovert. Crowds, not my thing. But I do recommend it to people, especially if you're starting out, just getting public reaction on your work and seeing what people like and what people don't.
Yeah.
May help you determine what will sell and what won't.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really massive point. And yeah, I mean, nobody ever thinks I am. I am a massive introvert, absolutely massive introvert, but I am also very, being an introvert's nothing to do with being shy. That's completely nothing. It's how exhausting everybody in the world is. And yeah, so I can go and be like really ultra sociable for like 4 hours. And then I just have to go home and kind of crawl into a corner and not talk to anybody for days because I just can't bear it anymore.
Yeah. But I've learned I've got about 2 hours at a crowded art reception in me, and then I'm done.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I've got. That's good.
That's it. That's exactly what we have to do. We just have to manage your energy and, be there. So yeah, all of these things can be a challenge. But as Holly has just very, very beautifully demonstrated, go, turn up, don't chicken out, don't sell yourself short, just be there, put a smile on your face and go for it and talk about your art. And yeah, wow. I'm just so happy, Holly, that we've just connected them last few little dots whilst I'm just getting ready to produce this episode. So everybody, right, there's a couple more minutes of this original conversation left to go, which does the wrap up. And then, so I'll be sharing all of Holly's stuff as well. And yeah, Holly, thank you so much for hopping on last minute as we had our little last minute brainstorm about doing this update. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And I'm sure everybody will be really super happy that you have, because you've shared a really inspiring experience and a really inspiring story. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
So it's been really wonderful speaking to you as ever. I just love digging about in the detail. You've come up with some really interesting stuff. I've loved the thread behind it all about the history and giving some belated voices to these hidden, lost women and surfacing their stories as well. So I always love that aspect of it as well. So do you know what, Holly? Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fabulous speaking to you. And everybody, make sure you go and follow Holly, Flossing in the Moonlight, and say hello, tell her where you found her as well. So, that's always interesting, isn't it? Finding out where people found us. Thank you so much, Holly. It's been fabulous speaking to you.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.